Gretel and Hansel is an adaptation of the fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Following their expulsion from their mother, the siblings head off into the woods and end up at the house of a witch. While there, strange and supernatural shenanigans occur. Gretel and Hansel takes the classic fairy tale and flips it on its head. Or at the very least, it tries to. It follows the story almost beat by beat, while also trying to be an original story. While the movie does establish mood in an effective way, it becomes boring very quickly. This was the first feature for a lot of key crew members, and not to harp on the fact, but it becomes evident that they didn't really harness their craft on this one. I can give it credit for not becoming over-reliant on jump scares, and director Osgood Perkins has an eye for composition, but it's not enough to save this dredge of a movie. The movie opens with a story of a young girl with a pink cap who was given terrible powers, and how children are lured into the forest.
Whispers told of an enchantress with the power to cure any ailment. But when that enchantress took away the illness, she left in its place a gift.
So, right away, it deviates heavily from the source material. It establishes its own world. We know that witchcraft and sorcery is a threat that exists.
And so, it was ordered that the child be returned to the darkness that made her. She was hidden away, deep in the woods, with no one to play with.
When Gretel and Hansel go off, we get moments where it seems as if there's witches around every corner. It's very atmospheric, and I kind of appreciate how they build the movie around it.
But still, she had her own way of making friends.
Speaking of changing up the story, the dad is nowhere to be found, and the children don't think of leaving a trail to find their way back. Unlike in the original fairy tale where the dad doesn't want to abandon his kids, and Hansel leaves pebbles so they can find their way home. So why do they leave? Because the mother wanted Gretel to work for the soul guy, and he wanted her to do, let's just say, less clean jobs. If you catch my drift.
Have you kept your maidenhood?
I beg your pardon?
Are you intact?
When she relays this back to her mom, she goes berserk and tells them to get out.
Or I'll hack you into tiny little pieces.
Right away, just with the cinematography, you can tell it's going to be one of those movies. You know, the kind where they use these kind of but not really fisheye lens, lots of lockdown shots where there's a lot of negative space above the characters' heads, handheld shots, shots that are just wide enough to give you the scope of the scene but close enough where the actor's at the center, almost like the director knows the script isn't the best but tries to hide it with the camera placement and the editing. I can give credit for trying, but it comes across as the movie trying way too hard to be artsy. Now that isn't to say the shots aren't creative. If there's one strength that this movie has, it's that the camera pulls back and lets you just observe what's within the frame and absorb the scenery. It helps that director of photography, Gallo Olivares, worked on Roma as a camera operator and as a cinematographer coordinator. Still, given that most of his other work as a cinematographer was on short films, it's clear that he's still finding his footing as a feature film cinematographer. Gretel and Hansel go off into the woods and they end up staying overnight, but that's when they come across this undead thing. It chases them, Gretel slaps his eye out, but then a hunter saves them in the nick of time. And the point of this scene was... Look, I know they want to introduce this character as a good guy, as well as someone who helps the siblings out, but it never explains who that weird guy was, and what he was doing there. I could understand if maybe a wolf or bear was chasing them, but some weird zombie dude? Makes no sense. The hunter gives them a map to town, but warns them that they need to stay strictly on the path. They head off towards the town, but they get hungry, so they stop to have some mushrooms. I don't think those were shiitake. After tripping major balls and running off into the woods, they come across a house where the witch lets them stay for a while. The house that belongs to the witch isn't made of gingerbread or candy, it's just an ordinary house. Ah yes, a welcoming home. All it needs now is a sign that says, definitely not evil. They go inside after Hoda, the resident, invites them in, where they see a massive spread of food inside. As they stay, Gretel has dreams about what goes on in the witch's basement. She also refuses to eat, while Hansel is more than happy to stuff his face. It's a nice way of including that part of the story, but with the witch being a more benevolent host. Or so she claims to be. This is the glaring issue with this movie. It's a slow burn, but it doesn't earn the right to be a slow burn. When you make a slow burn movie, you still have to keep it engaging enough for the audience to follow along. Otherwise, you're just making a slow movie that has no payoff, no interest. A slow burn doesn't automatically make it interesting. I don't know why I stuck with this movie for as long as I did, but I guess the curiosity of seeing where it was going got the best of me. The score for this movie is, effective but interesting. Lots of synth pads that are accompanied by an almost voice-like backing. There's almost no drums, and it always leaves you with that feeling that something is off. That being said, there are moments where it feels more like music for a sci-fi story than a dark fantasy. I swear there's one in there that reminds me of Mad Max Fury Road. Now the reason why they flip the names around is quite simple. Gretel is the clear protagonist of the story and is aged up to be older than Hansel, whereas in the original, they're both the same age. Sophia Lillis, best known as young Beverly in the It movies, does a solid job playing the teenage Gretel, having to look after her younger brother while also worrying about her own survival. However, it feels as if she's on cruise control the entire movie, with her character only making one key decision near the end, and that's about all she does. Hanzo is practically ignored, almost making you wonder why they even bother putting his name in the title to begin with. Hoda is eager to teach Gretel about being a witch, while suggesting that she doesn't need Hanzo. Turns out, she was the mother of the girl in the pink cap from the beginning, and she herself has been haunted by her spirit.
So I gave her back to the darkness that had made her, and thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. She stayed with me. In my thoughts, in my dreams, attached to me like my shadow.
She has been luring children to their deaths in the forest ever since. Despite her efforts, Gretel saves her brother in the end. By the way, the part of her burning the witch as her brother climbs towards a cage, that's 2 more references to the source. In the original, the witch gets put in the oven and Hanzo is fattened up in a cage. Throughout the movie, we see Hanzo go off to practice being a woodsman, and the last scene we see of him is him going back to the house and pick up the axe, a hint that he'll become a woodsman like his father. Gretel becomes a witch, freeing the souls of all the children the witch captured and promising to use her powers for good. Her fingertips then turn black, as Hoda's once were. Now here's where I think they could have made the movie more interesting. Why not make it a story about Gretel and Hansel growing up and growing apart and potentially becoming enemies? The entire movie feels like the first half, maybe even the first third of a longer movie, one where Gretel becomes a witch and Hanzo a woodsman. Maybe there's some friction between them as Gretel is rejected for being a witch and Hanzo decides to side with the village instead of his own sister. Maybe Gretel meets the girl in the pink cap, now all grown up, and has to decide whether to unleash revenge on being rejected or stick to the straight and narrow path of being a good witch. I'm not saying it would have been an amazing movie, but it would have at least given it a bit more substance. Besides, it would have added on to the themes of conflict between siblings and how desperate times tear families apart. Gretel and Hansel is a drag of a horror movie that barely holds your attention. There's nothing wrong with slow burn horror, but the slow burn has to be building up to something. You have to deliver on it. Visually, it is quite fascinating. The composition is well done, the use of color and space holds your attention, and nothing about it feels generic. However, style can only do so much heavy lifting for a movie that doesn't have a lot of substance. It mistakes moments of characters being alone as character development, weirdness as thrills, and moments of nothing happening as slow burn. There's a difference between having a movie that's slow and one where nothing really happens. I understand that the original story isn't that long, heck, none of the Grimm brothers' fairy tales are, but you can do so much with it. The girl in the pink cap still being alive could have been something. They could have played with the idea that there are more witches around, but no, it seems quite content with just following the beats of the original fairy tale and leaving it as is. Probably the worst thing about this movie is how not scary it is. There is some creepiness in it, it does a good job making you feel uneasy, but it never truly comes into its own as a tried and true horror movie. A saving grace of this movie is that it's only an hour and 27 minutes, so it doesn't eat up too much of your time. It has some moments here and there, but other than that, it's a bland movie. Unless you're a super hardcore fan of the Brothers Grimm or the horror genre in general, skip it. Alright, that's my review of Gretel and Hansel. There's only one more bad horror movie we're covering before we move on. Thank you for watching. This is the Canadian Movie Buff saying I hope you had a fantastic weekend at the movies. See ya!